Let's look at this map of the Americas, and let's focus here. Back then, the bottom half of this map was essentially carved up between two European superpowers, the Spanish and the Portuguese. Spain had a big chunk of Central America here in modern-day Mexico. This was where the European colonization of Meso-America began, which eventually led to the fall of the great Central and South American civilizations, the Aztecs and the Incans. These ancient civilizations were the superpower of the region and has dominated military and culture for centuries. But when the Europeans came, they fell, and they fell very quick. It only took the infamous Hernan Cortes 2 years and 800 conquistadors to completely collapse the Aztec Empire, which existed for centuries. Okay, they kind of also had tens of thousands of tribal local allies, but they all eventually died too. They died to this invisible enemy. Not arrows, not guns, not spear, but a virus. They died to smallpox. Let me tell you, one of the most insane pandemics that wiped out a civilization that most people have forgotten. It starts with this guy right here, Christopher Columbus. Some say he's a great explorer, but he's more of a mass murderer, a slaver, all in all a grade A asshole. At the time, land trade between Europe and Asia was restricted because of these guys called the Ottomans, who pretty much controlled the Middle East. So the Europeans had to find a new trade route to Asia if they didn't want to go through Ottoman land. So the King of Spain was like, Columbus, why don't you go and sail west and see if you can get to Asia? And instead of Asia, he found the Americas, the New World. Essentially, the years following this discovery of the New World, two European countries scrambled to gain control of it, mainly Spain and Portugal. And here comes one of our main characters of the story, Hernan Cortes. Another so-called explorer, but in reality, a mass murderer, a slaver, another grade A asshole. Essentially, Cortes was only tasked with exploration and modest trade with the locals. And these locals are, well, the Aztecs. And this is why he only brought like 800 people with him, because he was there to establish trade, not go to war. But Cortes got greedy. He had his own agenda. He decided to kill his boss, start a mutiny, and now he had his own army. An army he used to conquer the Aztecs. Things were getting so out of hand that the governor of Cuba, who sent Cortes to Mexico, sent another army to fight Cortes and bring him back to Cuba. Now in this second army, they brought something special. One of the soldiers in this new army brought smallpox. Smallpox is this disease that has been eradicated from the world since the 70s, but has been estimated to kill 300 to 500 million people in history. You start by getting a fever, and then a rash, and then eventually it becomes these fluid-filled blisters. Now before the Europeans arrived, the Americas were pretty much isolated from the rest of the world. They have never had contact or known contact with Europe or Asia, which means that the Aztecs had no idea what smallpox was. Cortes went to fight the second army and won, but smallpox had already infected his army. When he returned to the Aztec capital, his men brought smallpox with them. A while later, the Aztecs rebelled. They kicked Cortes out of their cities, and essentially Cortes had to leave because he lost. But they left one thing, one very important thing: smallpox. The disease affected people of all ages and social classes, including leaders, warriors, and common people, leading to a significant loss of knowledge, culture, tradition, labor skills, everything. Society was collapsing because people were dying at a crazy rate, and this made the native civilization crack and become vulnerable to the Spanish. You can argue that this was one of the most unintended yet efficient biological warfare strategies anyone in history has ever conducted. In the 1 year between Cortes's defeat and his return and eventual victory over the Aztecs, something crazy happened. Most of the Aztec army defending the city died of smallpox, and an estimated 25% of the local population perished. When Cortes returned and earned his victory over the Aztecs, he was fighting a completely different army, a much weaker Aztec empire. It was estimated that at the end of the conquest, up to 90% of the indigenous population died from the disease. It was projected that before the Spanish arrived, the Aztecs had a population of 25 million. And when they left, they had a little over 1 million. That's 24 million people dead. Let's not forget that the Aztec army was essentially made up of tribal alliances, and all these other tribes who were their allies essentially betrayed them and joined the Spanish instead. You can argue that it was likely that the conquistadors pretty much only fought like 10% of the Aztec army at their full strength. Now, a same story can be said about the Spanish conquest of the Incans. The Incan ruler Huayna Capac was killed by smallpox during the Spanish conquest of his empire, and around the same time the ruler died, another 200,000 of his people followed him because of this virus. Now, with this virus killing essentially everyone in the region, the Spanish and Portuguese had a very easy time conquering these lands. And this was the zenith of the two big boy colonizers, the Spanish and the Portuguese. These two countries were so cocky that even before their conquest into the Americas, they came together and signed the most ridiculous, most European, most pro-colonizer document of all time, the Treaty of Tordesillas. This treaty split the New World in two, and later the entire world between these two countries. I can't really explain how they decided to split it up because I can't really interpret the map, but essentially it looks something like this. Eventually, Edward Jenner came up with a vaccine that was accepted by the West, and slowly over the next 100 years, smallpox was gone. But the impact of smallpox in Central and South America was very significant. We're talking about the complete destruction of culture, history, art, and even languages. And when we look at history, we always think that the Meso-American and South American native civilizations lost to guns. But in reality, they were a strong and advanced civilization. They didn't lose to the white men. They lost to the disease that the white men brought along with them. They lost to smallpox.